Welcome to another episode of Crackin' podcast. We're thrilled to introduce you to DeAnna Lozensky, a dedicated North Dakotan farmer, who, along with her husband Kelly, has transformed their 2,000-acre no-till grain farm into a beacon of regenerative agriculture since 2005. Seeding ancient grains and tending to the fields through the seasons, they've eradicated the need for seed treatments, fertilizers, insecticides, and fungicides, letting nature nourish their crops instead. For DeAnna, it's not just about the seed, but a holistic process that encompasses seed, soil, milling, and storage, with a staunch belief that the health of our bodies, animals, and the planet springs from the health of the soil. She offers an enlightening perspective on how ancient grains can significantly enhance digestion and overall health. Let's delve into her soil-sustaining, health-boosting journey right now.
Welcome. It's great to have you, Dan. This is awesome. Grains. We're going to be talking about grains today, especially the ancient grains, which my host will totally get into because he's on the ancient side, and so I just want to be honest with you, to talk about, you're from North Dakota, to be talking to somebody from North Dakota about grains. I honestly didn't think I'd be talking to somebody from that part of the world about grains. I would, I always think of North Dakota as Indian territory, the Badlands, rodeo and all that. So this is kind of cool to talk to somebody from North Dakota about grains. But I got to start off with grains have kind of a hot topic right now. And you hear whole grains, no grains, paleo, now ancient grains. Can we just kind of start off with what are ancient grains and what got you into this?
Okay, that's a very good question, and there's really not a very good answer. So it basically is referring to not just basically what's been around for 10,000 years. Those are the grains that are considered ancient grains. They could be legumes, they could be beans, it can be wheats. So it's a very broad statement. And so the ones that we grow a French heritage wheat, which actually isn't an ancient grain. It's a heritage variety because it's not as old as some of the other ones. We grow a French heritage wheat called Rouge de Bordeaux. That's our best and most popular grain that we grow. And we grow spelt, which is actually one of the three original wheats, and along with emmer and einkorn. We aren't growing emmer and einkorn this year, but we are growing spelt. We also grow an Egyptian hulless barley, which is it's my personal favorite, and that dates back about 8,000 years. So it's a pretty great, grain, and it started because really Guardian Grain started without a name just about 3 years ago. And there was I read a online ad through a local marketplace that was looking for desiccant-free wheat berries. And first of all, I was like, what the heck is a wheat berry? Because I'm a farmer and I had never heard it referred to that. We just always have called it wheat or seed. And so I realized that home bakers and home millers, did you know that that's a thing? People are milling their own flour at home. Did you know this?
No.
Okay. Well, either had I. I had no idea about that. But during the pandemic, when people were at home, one of the things that people really got into was what it used to be like. And they got into home milling with a countertop mill.
Wow.
That uses little granite stones to turn grain into flour that you can bake with, right? I had no idea that this was a huge resurgence and that it had been around. I feel kind of like I'm living out here in the hills and the rocks. Like I just didn't get, like I wasn't, and I see, right? Well, it's true, I am, but so I am out here in the hills and rocks. And the wind. We have a lot of wind. And so once I found out that a wheat berry was really just the seed that people were referring to as for grinding for flour, I was like, I have that. And desiccant free is the other qualification he was looking for, right? And desiccant free in the farming world means that we don't go over the top of mature grain with a chemical dry down. So no herbicide application just prior to harvest. So that it's a labeled practice in with grain farming that you can use a herbicide 7 to 10 days prior to harvest. We don't do that here on the farm. So I absolutely knew that my grain would be great for this man. And I called my husband and I said, hey, can you get me 2 buckets of wheat seed? And he was like, sure. He doesn't ask a lot of questions and he doesn't have a lot of time to like field my backstory. So he brought me 2 buckets of grain and I said, okay, so what is that worth? And he was like, DeAnna, you have a bushel of wheat here. I was like, great. So $5.20. He said, yep, that's what it goes for at the elevator. I was like, well, I can't charge my customer $5.20. The bucket cost me $7. Like I can't, because I got a food grade bucket because I had to do some quick research on how to sell whole grain into direct to consumer market. And it had to be in a white food grade bucket or in a paper bag. And I didn't have paper bags big enough to fit that. So, and he was like, you're a customer. And I was like, right. So there's this guy that wants wheat berries for home milling for flour. And he was like, wait, a wheat berry? I was like, I know, right? It's just the wheat. And he was like, okay. And I said, well, I can't charge him $5.20 because these buckets cost more than that. So I met my first customer in a hardware store parking lot in my nearby town of 15 minutes away the very next day. And he's been my original customer and he's still my customer. And last year he came out and harvested wheat with me in my combine. So it's pretty awesome, but really he's the reason that Guardian Grains started because I had no idea that people didn't have access to whole grains and we grow it by the thousands and thousands of bushels. And I thought that we needed to change it. And so that's how Guardian Grains started with just hard red spring wheat, a modern variety. And as I started reaching out and finding new customers, they were asking me to grow heritage grain, ancient grains. I had no idea what ancient grains were. I had no idea where to find the seed. And it was as hard as you might think to find 8,000-year-old seed. And my husband was very great to, at the time, he was the only one seeding the crop. I didn't have my own little drill to seed the crop. So he was the only one seeding it. And he said, just find me the seed. And so I did. I found Egyptian hullus barley and I found Rouge de Bordeaux. That's a French heritage wheat and spelt. And spelt is one of the original.
Where do you find those? Where was
right
8,000-year-old?
I know, right? Okay, so that is it's so random, right? But I'm calling all over the US and into Canada to find these seeds and different grains. And the farmer that had grew them out from 50 seeds, 50 seeds that he got from a guy that brought him over from the Fertile Crescent in his pocket in the 90s.
What?
Like from
from
a seed bank.
What's a Fertile Crescent?
Oh, from the Fertile Crescent. So in the Middle East is where these grains originate.
Oh my God.
From the Fertile Crescent. Yeah.
That
right.
Is
so
cool.
And he was in my state. Yes, that's exactly right.
The voice.
That's messy.
It's just his voice just appears.
Out of nowhere.
Well,
I was really shocked that they asked me that too. I was like, wait, what?
Well, you know what, Lance, just because we may have heard of it, there's people listening that may not have heard of it.
True. So, sure. That's a great backtrack.
There
yeah,
you
absolutely.
Go, right?
You knew all of the time. I'm sure you did.
Of course, Spencer did. He's from Morocco, so he knows all about that stuff. Okay, I'm just
My
helping
mother
you
is.
out.
I have
Yeah,
never
I'm
been to
helping you
Morocco.
out. And, hi, Mom. By the way.
Yeah. Oh,
I know.
she already
No.
loves you. My mother loves
So
him.
I got a question. What's today's grain changed from ancient grain, and how does how does a grain get a title?
That's a good question. So they okay, so back in the 1800s, it started with hybridizing, right? And changing and selecting different characteristics for grains that would grow better in different areas, right? So that's where the grains start changing. And every grain, every wheat variety actually can be linked back to einkorn, which is a 10,000-year-old variety. It's basically the mother wheat, right? It has a very different chromosome profile. But that is, and so everything has been hybridized and changed from that. And so I had customers who said, well, I have gluten intolerance and I don't have very good luck with modern wheat, but I have very good luck with heritage wheats and ancient grains. And I was like, I'll find the seed and I'll start growing it. I don't know if it'll grow here. I'm sure it will. We grow wheat, like we're a wheat state.
Gosh.
And so yeah, and so it went down this rabbit hole of trying to give customers what they wanted. And I was interested, and my husband's very on board, and he had no idea the rabbit hole I was dragging him down of delivering a food grade grain to direct to consumer. It's been a lot, and but it's been awesome and rewarding all at the same time. So how does it get a name? That's a good question. That's basically all the breeders decide what it should be called. Our Rouge de Bordeaux is named that because it came from the Bordeaux region of France. So, and it has actually dates back to Roman times, but the name came from the 1800s. So it's just kind of, it's really neat.
Wow.
What time period are we considering to be called an ancient grain?
Okay. Ancient grains, I was just at a conference the other day, and the kind of somebody I consider an expert in ancient grains, he kind of said, as long as it's 1,000 years old, it's an ancient grain.
Oh, good Lord.
That's when I was born. That's when I was
Right.
born. Yeah.
So you already know what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah. I used to eat
Yeah.
that back then. No. Listen, DeAnna, let me ask you. You mentioned something earlier that was you brushed right over, but I think it's really important. You said, what did you say about herbicide? Herbicide that who's allowed 7 to 10 days prior to harvest to use an herbicide?
Okay, so
how does that work?
So just very briefly, there are up until very recently, there have been two different types of farming. There have been a conventional way to farm using fertilizer, insecticide, fungicide, and herbicide, right? Conventional method, that's kind of falls under that umbrella. And then there's been organic, right? So there's been two fields of growing practices. Organic still is allowed to use chemical. It's just not the same chemical that's allowed in conventional agriculture. It doesn't mean chemical free, like a lot of the labeling suggests. It's just a different, there's a different spectrum of chemicals that they're allowed to use in the organic industry. So for herbicide is a way to kill weeds without killing your crop, right? And so the herbicide, in the conventional farming model, it is labeled by the EPA and the USDA that you can spray a chemical herbicide over the top of a nearly mature grain to help dry it down, to make it dry down easier, so it's easier for harvesting. You get a more consistent moisture level on the grain, which the elevators like, which is where most of the commodities are delivered. And it kills any weeds that could make it harder to harvest the crop. So it doesn't have anything to do with maximizing yield in any way. It's really a method of being able to be as efficient with harvest as possible. And while, like I said, it is labeled that that conventional farmers can spray 7 to 10 days prior to harvest, we don't do that here on our farm, because I don't think it can't end up in the grain. Okay, so
That's impressive. I felt that was necessary to bring up because there's so many things that we're trained to look at a label. Some people don't care about looking at the label, but we look at a label and we trust what it says, and yet we're not really clear. Like you also said something about desiccant free. Now, a desiccant, who thinks that there's such a thing as a desiccant used to dry out, your crop or the harvest? What desiccants are used, and how does it affect the consumer?
Well, according to the label, it doesn't affect the consumer, right? But so the two of the most common desiccants used for wheat or small grains, so wheat, barley, oats, they are glyphosate and gramoxone. Those are the two. So gramoxone, you may have heard, is paraquat. Those are the two chemical agents that are most commonly used if they are used. Now, I need to let you know that most farmers are not going to go in with a desiccant unless the conditions were requiring it. Number one, it's very expensive. Number two, they don't want another pass over the cropland prior to harvest, right? So it's a very, I wouldn't say it's common, but it is allowed. So yeah, so that's how desiccant free. So how does it affect the consumer? They say it doesn't, but we don't desiccate on the farm because I don't believe we can keep it out of the end product, which is the goal. So I don't, I'm not condoning chemical use, and I'm not saying it's the absolute worst of the worst, but I'm saying we can use it better. And there are ways that we can keep the chemical out of the food and out of the air and out of the water. And that is our end goal, is to have absolutely clean chemical or grain with zero chemical trace. There's no residual in the grain. That's the goal. And we can do it that way, but it has to be done better.
So I got a quick question. We have these grains that you say the grains are 1,000 years old, or the seeds are 1,000 years old. Yet we're now growing them with modern technology. How does that, because the modern technology, the modern processing, how does that affect this ancient seed, or does it?
Yeah. Okay. So I need to tell you that in our farming system, so we're a no tillage system. So that means I don't go through and disrupt the soil at all. It's a minimal disturbance with a single slice just to plant the seed. So there's no tilling, no black dirt, right? When I see tilled black ground, I see heat and I see dirt, which is dead soil. So we try to keep that as covered as possible. So we're a no-till system. And we also don't use any fertilizer. So those fertilizers that are on the conventionally grown crops, like nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, zinc, all of those amendments, we don't use any of those. We don't use any insecticide at all. So we can't go and kill the pests that are attacking the plants because there's no way to not kill the beneficials. They're indeterminate, so they kill everything. So no insecticide, no fungicide either, and no pre-harvest desiccant. So those are the things that we are doing on our farm in our 2,200 acres that we manage. And it's a way of trying to restore soil health, because I believe that human health and animal health starts in the soil. And if we can heal the soil, we can have healthier people and healthier animals and a healthier planet. And that's our goal on the farm.
DeAnna, were you raised in an environment that you're very passionate about health and wellness and the absence of chemicals, and I mean that's only becoming something now that people are much more aware of. But where's this knowledge and passion?
Where does it come from?
Coming from?
It comes from having years of experience on the farm of doing the opposite. So I came from the city and from Minneapolis, and I traded in my high heels for cowboy boots when I joined the farm in 2005. And at that time, we were a full-on agronomy farm. So no tillage, right? That's been a part of our farming history since the 90s. But we were full-on everything else. Every fertilizer we could apply, every insecticide we had to apply, every fungicide we applied that if we needed it. And what we found we were doing, we were basically a doctor to sick plants. We were constantly treating sick plants with the industry standard prescription. And in that time frame, up until 2013, so about 10 years ago, we were under the impression that to be a good farmer, it meant that you need to grow the most bushels, no matter what it cost. So no matter how many hours it meant that we were in the field, no matter how many passes it took across the field, which could be 7 or 8 times being across the same piece of ground, and now we go across the field 3 times. So our impact on the system is much less than it was 10 years ago. So when we came out of that fog of what we had been told was being a good farmer, we started looking at things in a holistic way. And a little bit of guilt goes a long way. So we thought we were doing everything we needed to do to be good farmers. And then we started hearing about residual chemical in grains, and we started hearing about the disappearance of the pollinators and the disruption of the fungal network in the soil. And all of our practices during those timeframes up until 2013 contributed to that in a major way, at least in our in the acres that were under our management. And there's a huge piece of guilt that if we lean into that a little bit, we can change the way we operate the farm and change our mindset into looking at things on how we can keep life in the soil to contribute to better life for people and animals and the planet. And that's really what it changed for us.
You said a word, agronomy?
That's
what is that?
What agriculture. Agronomy is a term used for deciding what is the best prescription for your crop. So your crop looks yellow. It needs nitrogen. Your crop is full of leaf damage. It's got grasshoppers. You should spray that and use an insecticide. It's about prescribing sick plants medicine, right? And right now, our goal is to plant the seed and observe. That's really what it's been down to. So having said that, we are not 100% herbicide free on the farm. So the herbicide that we use on the farm is pre-plant, prior to planting our grain crop, and to control weeds, right? Because I said, so we have 2 options for controlling weeds. We could control weeds with a tillage pass, which completely destroys the microbial community and the largest living ecosystem, right? Or we can use a herbicide pass. at a reduced rate. And our goal is to minimize the disturbance of the soil life. And for us to minimize disturbance, and control weeds, that's a herbicide pass. And so those are the only things that we are doing on the farm, is planting the seed, spraying the weeds if we absolutely have to. And if we don't, we don't. There are some years we don't spray at all, and there's some fields we never spray. It just really depends. But the end goal and what we focus on is the outcome. Can we use a herbicide for weed control prior to planting the crop? And at the 3 to 4 leaf, when the wheat is this big, prior to, and just in a vegetative state, without having reproduction happening, can we use a herbicide safely and have it stay out of the food? So we work with a lab in Massachusetts that's been testing our grain for the last 3 years for residual herbicide. So it's a test it's a study they're running. And we have not had a positive residual herbicide test yet on any of the grain that we grow. And that is because, God, I told you it's a complete rabbit hole, but that is because our microbial community in the soil is what actually metabolizes the herbicide we do use. There are, I know, right? Okay, this is gonna get wild, but
I'm gonna actually refer to you as Dr. DeAnna, chiropractor to plants.
Totally right.
Not anymore.
I mean, does she
Not
have
anymore.
the same? She has the same
heal
philosophy.
themselves. I
Well,
promise.
that's what we do,
Yeah,
right?
well,
Right.
what do we? That's what we do.
Right. I honestly, we're building a system that is starting to heal itself. And if our plants can be connected enough with the soil microbiome to heal itself, heal themselves, then the grain that we're producing from those plants should have those same endophytes to help the human body heal itself and help animals heal themselves. That's the idea, right?
I'm so impressed. Now, listen, I have a burning, age-old question that nobody seems to answer. Not even, remember, Dr. Seaman, I asked one of our nutrition guys, and that is, DeAnna, I have this faith that you're going to be able to answer this question.
Gosh, I'm like in the hot seat.
Why?
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
you are. Oh, there's plenty other questions
Okay, I'm ready.
after this one. Why is it that I, who is gluten-free and sensitive, I don't have an intolerance, I can go to Argentina and I can eat all sorts of things that I wouldn't typically eat here, that obviously bread, wheat related and all that.
Why?
What's up with that?
There are a few different things. Number one, I'll tell you the couple of the contributing factors, right? And these are
Dr. DeAnna, tell us.
Okay, so I'll lay it out for you. There are a couple contributing factors.
Yeah.
Number one, farming practices play a role. Okay? Our people are sick because the soils are sick. Okay? So number one, everything comes back to a soil health issue. All of it. We can't have soil health if we're going through doing a massive amounts of tillage, whether that's in the garden or on a large scale. Number one, right? Number one. Destroying the largest ecosystem on the planet is not the solution. So that's the number one. Farming practices play a role. Now, which parts of the farming practices are playing a negative role in the grains that you're reacting to? Could it be the fertilizer? Could it be the insecticide? Sure. Could it be the fungicide? Yep. Could it be it could be any of those things. But I think the way food is presented to us on the store shelves is not food anymore. It's overly processed, right? So there's a farming factor, but there's a huge processing factor where the wheat that you are offered on the grocery store shelves, even in Whole Foods Market, is not what I grow. It is a bad representation of the grain that we grow. It is, and the flour, what happens, the grain goes to these massive millers, and they take the three parts of the kernel, the wheat kernel has, the inside of it is endosperm, and that's the starchy part. And there's germ around that, and then there's bran. So they separate it all out. Okay? They separate the three pieces. And then the germ is heat treated to kill the enzymes. That also kills the good enzymes that are going to help your gut microbiome. But on a bonus, it does extend the shelf life. Right? Okay, so in preservation, they kill the enzymes in the germ. And then the bran, now I'm talking about all-purpose flour, okay? All-purpose, the real white stuff. The bran from that is extracted and kept away, and it's sold back to us in a supplement. Vitamin E. Bran is a huge source of vitamin E. So flour is cheap on the grocery store shelves because it's the byproduct of what they're really selling us, which is the bran, which is all the nutrition, which is what we're buying in the supplement and in the vitamin E.
Oh my God.
So
That is unbelievable.
I'm sorry. I really have to. That's the truth of it. So on the grocery store shelves, when you see all-purpose flour, you're getting Frankenflour. It's a bad science experiment that they've been allowing to go on for an entire century.
Wow.
And it dates back to the World Wars when the soldiers were getting sick and they were malnourished, and it turned out that they had because of the refined flour. When they moved from stone milling to refining the flour, there was not enough nutrition for the soldiers in the bread they were getting, and they started to enrich it, which meant they started to add back the bran that they were taking away. And they've known that it's been making people sick for 100 years, and they continue to do it. So that's why when we started Guardian Grains and I started to offer a stone milled, I wanted to offer flour because I wanted people to have something recognizable in their pantry. If they didn't know what to do with a wheat berry, they could use flour. That's why we went to stone milling. We went to an ancient way of milling grain that mills all of the parts together and offers it in a full nutrition flour without heat treating it or extracting it in any way. So, yes, our flour does not have the shelf life that all-purpose flour does. It should be kept in the fridge and should be kept in the freezer to preserve, to make sure that the oils in the bran and the germ don't go rancid, right? Because I'm not heat treating it in any way. Because I want people to get the most nutritional benefit for their gut health, and that happens in the enzymes of the germ that I'm not heat treating. So those are my answers. The answer is yes, farming is a contributing factor, but a bigger contributing factor is the processing that is happening to the grain I grow before it gets to the consumer.
Now,
that's why you can't tolerate it.
Let me ask you. Yeah, that blows me away, and that makes all the sense in the world. Just even from the earlier conversation about how, what goes into conventional farming and all the chemicals and the ground and what the tilling and that just is shocking to me because I would never suspect that. Do you have any stories about people that have had gluten intolerances or other chemical intolerances that switched over to your
yeah,
your
absolutely.
flour,
So as I said, we started growing ancient grains and heritage grain because I had customers that said they were less sensitive and didn't react to those types of grains because they hadn't been hybridized. So absolutely, we want to offer people what they can thrive on. So I have a chiropractor friend, and it's a very, very fun story. So we when we started Guardian Grains, as I said, I was just delivering whole grains through UPS to direct to consumer to their homes. And then we started offering stone milled flour and heritage artisan pasta made with our French heritage wheat. So, but to do that, I needed to buy a stone mill, which I did. I found a New American, it's called a New American stone mill. It's made out on the East Coast by a baker that has designed his own mill. And now he's building them for millers like me, and on farm use and off farm use, and for bakeries, so they can have fresh flour to offer the best nutrition for their customers. There's a huge part of that restaurant industry that has an obligation to start feeding the population better. And there are some that are really, all in to do that. So I found the stone mill. We bought it. Now I needed a place to put it, right? I needed a place that was a USDA inspected facility, because now we're processing it and taking the grain from flour as a processing aspect. So I needed it to be a USDA inspected facility. And I wanted to offer pasta. We have 4 pasta companies in my state. So I thought, well, great, we'll partner with them. I'll bring my flour and they'll process this into exactly what I'm wanting, which is a whole nutrition pasta with water. So that's what I wanted. And none of the 4 companies in my state could do that. Or if they could, they couldn't tell me that the flour I brought was the product I got. So the traceability went away. And I'm using a heritage wheat variety, so I specifically need to get my product back. And so there was a lot of hurdles to bring these 2 pantry staples of pasta and flour to people's pantry. There was a lot of hurdles, and I just wasn't willing to give up. And I was talking with the director of Northern Crop Institute, which is in Fargo, North Dakota, in our area. And he said, you're wanting to make pasta. And I was like, right, I want to make pasta, but nobody will do it. I can't. And I'm not willing to offer people more of what they can already get. Do you know whole wheat pasta on the shelf, to be labeled whole wheat, only has to be 51% whole wheat? Did you know that? Like, that's... Yeah, right. Well,
I knew something was fishy.
It is fishy. About that. Okay, so, and blonde pasta, the yellow stuff that you see on the shelf, that's made with semolina flour. Semolina flour is from Durham. Semolina actually comes from the endosperm of the inside of the kernel, which is all starch and sugar. So when we eat pasta, this blonde pasta, and we feel like sluggish and tired, like you're in a coma afterwards, it's because you've got to do just nothing but starch and sugar when we ate that. And guess what? Our bodies can't process starch and sugar. And so our body's like, I don't even know what to do with this, so I'll just set this on your hip for 20 years. And that's exactly what happens. And so when we deliver pasta, a whole nutrition pasta with all of the germ and all of the bran together, then it becomes digestible. Then our bodies can absorb the nutrition that's actually in it, right? It's a crime against humanity is what's happening on the store shelves, right? And so this is what I wanted. I wanted French heritage wheat because of the flavor profile is really amazing. And I wanted to stone mill it with all of the nutrition of the bran, the germ, and the endosperm all together. And I wanted to add water. And so we went to Northern Crop Institute, where they did a pasta pilot for me. And they had a stone mill there. And they were like, well, we don't usually use stone milled flour in pasta. And we don't usually use hard red wheat. We use Durham. I was like, that's exactly why we're doing this. We're doing this to try something different. Let's get out of the box. Let's offer people something they can't get. And he said, well, we're going to have to sift off the bran, DeAnna, and then hammer mill it and then reintroduce it in smaller pieces into this flour. I said, no, we're not. We're not doing that. And he was like, well, this isn't going to work. I said, well, when it doesn't work. And he said, and when it doesn't work, I said, well, when it doesn't work, we can quit because I'm not going to offer people more of what they could already get. And he's like, well, you're going to have to add egg powder to make sure this sticks together. I said, I don't want to add egg because then it's not a vegan option. Like, I want stone milled flour and water, and that's it. And he kind of rolled his eyes at me and was just like, where did this woman come from? And my husband's just like, just tell her yes. Right? My husband's just like, my husband Kelly is, he's learned a lot in the last 17 years. And he was just like, just say yes. Just do it. And guess what? We were able to produce the pasta that I wanted by just adding water. And so great. I had a way to do it, but now I had no pasta company that would do it the way I wanted to. And so I talked to Northern Crop Institute, and they said there is a place in Tuttle, North Dakota, that is looking for a pasta project. And I was like, what? No. Where is Tuttle? Turns out it's 110 miles to the south and east of me, which is not that far in North Dakota. I mean, it's all relative. And so I was like, okay. And so I get the phone number. I call this little director of the Tuttle Rural Innovation Center, which is as awesome as it sounds. It's in a 100-year-old schoolhouse. And they've reimagined it into being this rural innovation center. So I'm calling and I'm talking to the director of this facility, and I'm like, how many days a week do you produce pasta? What kind of packaging do you like? How do you ship it? And she's like, wait. I don't have anybody to run the machine. I was like, wait, what? And she's like, no, we have a $25,000 Italian pasta machine sitting in here under a cloth that we don't. What I'm wanting to do is rent the kitchen out and have you be able to use the pasta machine with the rented space. I was like, I don't know how to make pasta. Like, I wasn't trying to be the farmer, the miller, and the producer all at once, right? No, I just want to grow the grain and have you deliver it in a better way, right? So I was like, oh gosh. So like I had said a while back, this stone milling at home is a huge thing. And I have, in the last 3 years, been stone milling my own flour on my countertop, right? So I brought stone milled flour from home to the Tuttle Rural Innovation Center in November to meet Jasmine and see this pasta machine. And we drive there, and my husband's with me, and it's November in North Dakota, and it's starting to snow. And we get there to this 100-year-old schoolhouse, and it's a 3-story brick building. It's awesome looking. And you get down, you turn onto Main Street in this town of 60 people, and it's at the end of Main Street, like a beacon of hope, right? To me, that's how I see it. And we drive there, and we get in there, and it's really cold in there. And my husband's just like, I'm going to go get my jacket. He goes get his jacket, and she's like, oh, the coal furnace went out. And we're like, oh, you're heating on coal. And she said, yes. She's like, but we've got parts on ordered, and we're fixing it. So I joke and say we walked in and my husband checked out because there was no heat, there was no hot water, there was no way to, it was very difficult, but she was very resourceful and like, no problem, we'll heat it with a percolator, So long story short, I know it's a long roundabout way. We made pasta that day, and we left there, and my husband put his hand on my knee, and he said, I am really sorry. This is not going to work out for you. And I looked at him, and I was like, what are you talking about? We are doing this. And he was like, wait, what? He's like, there are no people. And I was like, I just need 2. And he was like, there is no heat. I'm like, they're fixing it. And he was like, oh gosh. And so that's how it started. And so long story short, this is how I met my chiropractor friend. He was a coffee roaster in the Tuttle Rural Innovation Center. And he was like, oh, you're milling wheat. I have an intolerance, right? I was like, maybe you won't have an intolerance to the wheat I grow. And he was like, really? And so we started talking, and the day we moved the stone mill into the Tuttle Rural Innovation Center, which is downstairs, 19 steps, And to get this 2,000-pound behemoth down the steps took practically the entire community and my chiropractor friend. And so after we got it all set up, I had a meal of minestrone soup made with our pasta, fresh bread made with spelt flour and rouge de Bordeaux, and then cookies made with fresh flour. And so my chiropractor friend had been gluten-free for 15 years strictly. Like, he is not touching it. He doesn't feel good. And I said, "How does it affect you?" And he said, "I get an instant headache. Within an hour, I'm sick." And I was like, "Well, no wonder you don't, right, like, I get it." And so I was like, yeah, I don't, this is a lot for you." And he was like, "I'm trying everything." I was like, "Oh gosh, I'm starting to sweat," because he hasn't had gluten in 15 years and he's going to try the minestrone soup. And I call our facility a gluten-full facility. He's going to try the minestrone soup with the noodles. He's trying a piece of bread and he's having a cookie. And I'm sitting there next to him watching, like, waiting for him to just keel over, right? Because I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this is a lot of pressure."
Yeah.
And then he got up. I was like, "How will I know if it affects you?" He was like, "You'll know right away. I'll know right away and I'll let you know." I was like, "Okay." So I'm watching and waiting and just the pressure. And then he gets up and I'm like, "Oh, he's sick." And he goes back for seconds. And I was like, "What?"
God.
And so he was like,
Wow.
"DeAnna, I can't believe it." I was like, "I grow wheat you can eat?" And he was like, "You grow wheat I can eat?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh."
Oh.
So that's I know it's a long about, but it's,
That was great.
you can understand that, like, it's a complete alignment of the stars, right? To get that to work out. Like, how on earth is there a $25,000 pasta machine in the basement of this Tuttle Rural Innovation Center, who also houses a coffee roaster, who is a 15-year gluten-free paleo guy? Like, right? Like, that's not right. And this is another part of this awesome story, is that I needed two people to run my facility, right? And there had been two people that had relocated to a farm just outside of Tuttle from Louisiana after the last hurricane. And one came from the hotel management, and the other came from the food industry. So together, they worked together, and they worked together in Tuttle and producing flour and pasta for me every day of the week, and it's really awesome. So initially the idea was that we would be working out of the Tuttle Rural Innovation Center just till we could set something up on farm, so it would be closer for me to manage. That is no longer in the cards. We will continue to work out of Tuttle for as long as we can make it work and thrive there, because I love the idea of using the existing infrastructure. I love the idea of the small community that has embraced us. I love our teammates that work there. And it's awesome, right? It's awesome. So yeah, so that's one story of a customer who was, I mean, but that is just full on. I was like, "Could you just not eat all of it? Maybe just try like a little bit at a time." But no, he just whole hogged it, and I was like, "Oh my gosh!"
Well,
So it was wild.
I think since we know who you're talking about, since he's one of our good friends, and
Yes.
and I think you just should have made him ho hog it all the way. So Tim, if you're listening, you should have had 4 helpings and just seen how you handled it. And
Well, and it was really great for me because while he was roasting there, then we traded. We traded flour for
Coffee.
his coffee. So it was an awesome
Coffee.
deal for me. And so
Yeah.
that's just one of the instances, but I have lots of customers
That's awesome.
not that are able to enjoy wheat the way we grow it.
This is also a good time for us to plug our sponsor, because we have a Crackin Bass coffee, and it's actually made by our friend Tim. So
Yes. The best coffee.
it's the best coffee ever. And you know what? This has been awesome, and we got to close pretty quick.
Yeah.
But I do want to say something that you kind of just briefly mentioned at the very end, that the word paleo, because I know Tim is paleo, And a lot of people that talk about paleo diets, it's against grains. Yet paleo is about ancient diets, and you're dealing with ancient grains. So I think these are grains that you can eat with the paleo diet. Is that correct?
That's what my paleo customers tell me. That's how they reconcile it, right?
Perfect.
It's not grain. It doesn't have to be grain free if they're eating ancient grains, which our spelt is. And the spelt and the heritage, French heritage, Rouge de Bordeaux, and the Egyptian hullus barley. So we flake that, and that's what we offer our customers as a breakfast food instead of oats. So that's pretty awesome. The flake barley is an ancient variety, and it has 18% protein versus milling oats only have 11. And we don't heat treat them like most milling oats are heat treated like oatmeal. And so you cook it just like oatmeal, except it has a greater flavor profile and a deeper nutritional profile. So it's pretty awesome.
That's awesome.
I'm absolutely fascinated about the semolina pasta because I never knew why I got so sluggish and tired. I am definitely, I got to order this pasta. I got to find out. I don't care what you got. I'm going to order it all because I'm dying to try. I want to be a Dr.
Right?
Tim and see what
Like I
happens.
said, it was just a little bit of pressure, but it was awesome. And he's got an awesome story about it. And he's gracious enough to let me tell it. And it's in the artisan pasta is brass die pressed. Okay, so this is another thing you didn't know, and I'm going to blow your mind one more time. Brass die pressed, so it gives the pasta a rough texture, which helps it hold more sauce. So whatever sauce you're using, you want to add a little extra. But did you know in most pasta production, they're all of the pasta is pressed through Teflon? Did you know that? They're all pressed through.
So it's smooth.
And it's the Teflon dye that it's pressed through and extruded through. So all of the pasta comes in contact with Teflon, every bit of it, and it's to reduce the dust in these huge pasta facilities. So there's a little tidbit that
talk about ending with a bang.
Just gonna blow up the whole world.
No,
it will. It's not easy to change the food system, but some of these conversations have to be had.
Absolutely. On that note, we're gonna leave people hanging on that note and call it. But this was awesome, and we are gonna put a tag or a link to your site at the on the description for those listening, because I think they need to look into what they're putting in their mouths a lot more. And we so appreciate your time and your energy, and this was awesome. So thank you so much for your time.
I want to get that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Crackin' Backs podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you follow us on Instagram at Crackin' Backs Podcast. Catch new episodes every Monday. See you next time.